Hello, my friends, and a very warm welcome back to the Best English podcast. I'm your host, Sophia, and it is a true pleasure to have you with me today. You know, every week I get to sit here and talk to you about something I'm incredibly passionate about: unlocking your potential and helping you become the most confident and fluent version of yourself. And it's not just me talking to a microphone. It's you, listening in, ready to grow. Thank you for being here, for being part of this amazing community we're building together, and for your unwavering dedication to your English journey. Today, we are going to dive deep into a topic that I know, from countless messages and conversations with so many of you, is one of the biggest and most frustrating challenges of all. It's that feeling you get when you can read an English news article, listen to a podcast, or watch a movie and understand what's happening. You can follow the story, you can grasp the main ideas, and you feel like you've got a pretty good handle on the language. But then, a moment comes. You're in a real-life situation, and it's your turn to speak. Maybe someone asks you a simple question, maybe you want to express a thought, and suddenly, it's like your mind just goes completely blank. The words, the very words you know are in there, just feel stuck. It's a moment of silence and pure frustration, a feeling of, I understand English, but I can't speak. If that sounds familiar, then let me tell you, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're going to talk about why this happens, and more importantly, how we can fix it. This isn't a quick fix, but a journey of understanding, and I promise you, by the end of our time together, you'll have a new sense of hope and some truly practical tools to help you bridge this gap. So, let's start with the why. Why is it that our listening and reading skills, what we call our receptive skills, often seem to be so far ahead of our speaking and writing skills, our productive skills? Well, think of it like this. Your brain is a bit like a computer. When you're listening or reading, it's taking in information. It's decoding, processing, and storing data. It's an incredibly powerful process, and with enough practice, you become very, very good at it. You can build up a huge library of words, phrases, and grammar rules in your mind. But speaking is a totally different task. It's not just about taking in information. It's about actively retrieving it, organizing it, and producing it in real time, often under pressure. It's like going from being a very skilled listener to being a master storyteller on the spot. I want to tell you about a student I worked with a few years ago, a brilliant young woman named Anna. Anna was a librarian from Portugal, and she was absolutely amazing at English. She could read complex English novels with such ease. Books by Charles Dickens, Virginia Woolf, you name it. She understood the historical context, the subtle nuances, and the beautiful prose. But in our one-on-one sessions, when I would ask her to tell me about her favorite book, she would freeze. She'd start a sentence, then stop, shake her head, and say, "I know the words, Sophia. I can't find them." She could explain a complex plot point in her native tongue, but translating that deep understanding into spoken English was a massive hurdle. It was like she had a massive library of English words and ideas in her mind, but the door to the speaking part of the library was locked. This wasn't a lack of knowledge, but a lack of a bridge between her knowledge and her ability to produce it. The beautiful thing is that this is not a permanent condition, and we're going to build that bridge together today. The first big roadblock for many of us is a deep-seated fear. It's the fear of making a mistake. This is so common, and it's completely human. We're afraid that we'll say the wrong word, use the wrong tense, or that our pronunciation will be off. This fear is a huge blocker because it makes us hesitate, and that hesitation gives us time to second-guess ourselves. I remember another student, a kind and very intelligent man named David. He had a great English vocabulary and a wonderful sense of humor, but when he went to a local coffee shop, he would always just point to the coffee he wanted on the menu and nod. One day, I asked him, "David, why do you do that? You know how to say, 'Can I please have a latte?'" He looked at me and said, "Sophia, what if they don't understand me? What if I say it wrong? What if they laugh?" This fear of judgment, this constant internal voice of self-doubt, was silencing him. He had the words, but the fear was holding him hostage. Another huge mental hurdle is something I call the perfectionist trap. Many of us feel that if we can't say something perfectly, we shouldn't say it at all. We try to translate an entire complex thought from our native language into English, perfectly, before we even start to speak. But real conversation doesn't work that way. It's messy, it's full of pauses, and it's full of small errors, even for native speakers. Trying to achieve perfection before you open your mouth is like trying to finish a marathon before you even take your first step. It's impossible. We need to shift our mindset from trying to get it right to simply trying to get it out. The goal is not perfection. The goal is communication. We have to give ourselves permission to make mistakes, to stumble, to pause, and to get back up again. Mistakes are not a sign of failure. They are the sign that you are trying, that you are learning, and that you are actively building the speaking muscle. So let's start with some very simple, practical, and low-pressure techniques to get you moving. We're not going to jump into a deep-end conversation right away. We're going to start by getting comfortable with the sound of your own voice speaking English, and we're going to build that bridge from your listening brain to your speaking brain, one brick at a time. The first technique is called shadowing. This is an incredibly effective tool for B1 learners, and honestly, for anyone who wants to improve their speaking fluency and pronunciation. It's simple. You listen to a short piece of audio, like a line from a podcast or a movie, and you try to repeat it out loud at the exact same time, mimicking the speaker's rhythm, tone, and pronunciation. You are literally shadowing them. You're not thinking about the meaning, you're just focusing on the sound and the physical feeling of making that sound. I remember my student, a young man from Vietnam named Quan, who was so shy about his accent. He felt it made him sound less intelligent, even though his English was very good. I introduced him to the shadowing technique. At first, he felt a little silly doing it. He'd find a short clip from an interview, maybe a sentence like, "I'm really excited about the future of this project," and he'd try to repeat it. It was hard at first, but with daily practice, he started to notice something amazing. He wasn't just copying the sounds, he was starting to feel the rhythm of the language. He realized that native speakers link words together in ways he hadn't noticed before, and he started to mimic that flow. After a few weeks, he told me that he felt like he was dancing with the language instead of just walking one word at a time. Shadowing gave him the confidence to try speaking, because he was now more comfortable with the sounds and rhythms of English. It's like a warm-up for your mouth and your brain. Here's a simple shadowing exercise you can try right now. I'm going to say a few short sentences. Just listen to me, and then try to repeat them out loud as closely as you can. Don't worry about being perfect. Just feel the rhythm. It's a beautiful day, isn't it? I'm looking forward to the weekend. Could you tell me how to get to the library? Now find a podcast or a short audio clip and try it yourself, just for a few minutes a day. The key is to not focus on the meaning, but on the sound. This is about building the physical habit of speaking, not the mental habit of translating. The next powerful technique is what I call the response rehearsal. You know when you're watching a TV show and a character says something and in your mind, you have a perfect witty response? Well, it's time to say it out loud. This is a simple but profound way to bridge that gap between understanding and speaking. Find a podcast or a short video on a topic you enjoy, like cooking, sports, or travel. As you listen, every time the speaker says something, mentally think of a response and then say it out loud. You're not just listening passively, you're actively creating a conversation, even if it's a one-sided one. I remember my student, Mateo, who was a passionate football fan from Spain. He was great at understanding English sports commentators, but he couldn't talk about his favorite team with his English-speaking friends. I told him to try this exercise. He would listen to a football podcast, and when the host would say something like, "Manchester United had a fantastic game last night," Mateo would pause the podcast and say, "Yes, I agree." The forward was incredible. He scored 2 amazing goals. Wow! He was forcing himself to retrieve the words and form the sentences out loud. After a while, he noticed that the pauses became shorter and shorter. He was training his brain to move from a receptive state to a productive state. When his friends asked him about the game the next week, the words came out naturally, almost without him thinking. He had rehearsed this conversation hundreds of times in his head and out loud. Here's a simple response rehearsal prompt for you to try. Imagine you're at a friend's house and they say to you, "I've been so busy lately. I feel like I have no time to relax." What would you say in response? Take a moment and just say something out loud. It can be a simple, short response. Maybe you'd say, "I know what you mean. My work has been really busy too. Odd." Or maybe you'd say, "You should try to take some time for yourself this weekend." Or more. The point is to make that thought a spoken reality, to get the words out of your mouth, no matter how small or simple the sentence. Another incredibly effective, low-pressure exercise is the 3-sentence story. This is perfect for B1 learners because it focuses on simple, common sentences and a clear structure. The idea is to tell a very short story about your day or a recent experience using just 3 sentences. For example, my 3-sentence story today might be, "I woke up early this morning to watch the sunrise. I made a cup of coffee and read my book. It was a very peaceful start to the day." It's simple, it's structured, and it forces you to use basic past tenses and vocabulary. You can do this at any time, just for yourself. A student of mine, a nurse named Hiroshi, found this to be a game changer. His work required him to speak some English, but he often felt tongue-tied. He started practicing the 3-sentence story every evening before bed. He'd tell himself about his day. "Today was very busy at the hospital. I helped a lot of patients, and it was a good feeling. Now I am tired and ready for bed." Well, this low-stakes practice built his confidence to the point where he could share a simple story or a feeling with a colleague without hesitation. It was a small habit that made a huge difference. Now, let's add another layer. This next technique is a more advanced version of thinking in English, and it's called mindful English. This is about consciously and intentionally using English for your internal monologue. The idea is to narrate your day and your surroundings to yourself in English, almost like a silent, personal documentary. As you're walking, you might think, "The sky is a little gray today, and it looks like it might rain. There are many people walking quickly with umbrellas, The traffic seems very heavy this morning. This isn't about speaking to anyone. It's about making English the language of your internal world. I remember a young chef from Italy, Isabella, who was working in a restaurant in London. She was very good at understanding her colleagues and the customers, but she felt like she couldn't express her creativity and ideas in English. I suggested she try mindful English while she was cooking. As she chopped vegetables, she would think to herself, "Okay, I'm chopping these red onions. I need to be careful with the knife. The onions are making my eyes water. Now I am adding garlic and olive oil to the pan. The smell is wonderful." This seemingly simple habit completely transformed her. She was not only practicing vocabulary related to her passion, but also building a direct, unfiltered connection between her actions and her English thoughts. Eventually, she was able to clearly and confidently explain her cooking process and her menu ideas to her colleagues and her boss. She had made English the language of her craft, and that's a powerful thing. Now, I want to talk about something that is a very important part of this journey: setbacks. Because this journey is not a straight line, there will be days when you try one of these techniques and it just doesn't work. Your brain will feel tired and you'll go back to translating. And that is okay. It's part of the process. I want to tell you about a setback that one of my students, Lena, faced. Lena had been making amazing progress with her speaking. She was using the 3-sentence story, and she was getting more comfortable with her pronunciation. She felt ready for a real-life challenge, so she decided to go to a farmer's market and try to ask a vendor about their produce. She mentally rehearsed what she wanted to say. "Hello, could you tell me where these apples are from? They look delicious." But when she got to the stall, the vendor, a very friendly man, spoke to her first. He said, "Morning, can I help you with something? Everything's very fresh today." Died. His accent was a little different from what she was used to, and he spoke quickly. Lena's mind just went completely blank. She couldn't find the words, and she just pointed to the apples and smiled nervously. She left the market feeling defeated, and she messaged me later that day, feeling like a complete failure. I told her, "Lena, you didn't fail. You learned." I explained that this was a perfect example of what happens in real life. It's not a controlled environment. The speed, the accent, and the unexpected questions can throw you off. But the important part was not that she didn't speak, it was what she did next. We talked about it, and we practiced listening to different accents. We practiced asking for clarification. And the next week, she went back. This time, she wasn't focused on perfection. She just tried to get one word out. When the vendor asked, "Can I help you with something?" she took a deep breath and just said, "Yes." It wasn't the perfect response, but it was a start. And that yes was a massive victory. It was the moment she started to rebuild her confidence from the ground up. This brings us to a very important point for you, our B1 listeners. At the B1 level, you have a solid foundation. You understand the main points of clear standard input on familiar matters regularly encountered in work, school, and leisure. You can deal with most situations likely to arise while traveling in an area where English is spoken. The key is to move from simply understanding to actively using the language in these familiar situations. The goal is not to sound like a native speaker. The goal is to be able to communicate effectively. Here are some specific B1 speaking goals you should be working towards. You can describe experiences and events, dreams, hopes, and ambitions. You can give reasons and explanations for opinions and plans. You can narrate a story or an event. You can interact spontaneously in a range of familiar contexts. The techniques we've talked about today are designed to help you achieve exactly that. They are about moving from passive understanding to active, confident communication. Don't wait until you think you have a perfect sentence. Just try to get the words out. Every little attempt, every single word you speak, is a step forward. So, let's quickly review the comprehensive path we've explored today. We started by understanding the fundamental gap between receptive and productive skills and the mental hurdles that keep us from speaking. We then armed ourselves with practical, low-pressure techniques, shadowing, to build comfort with the rhythm and sound of spoken English, the response rehearsal, to practice actively responding to what you hear, the three-sentence story, to build confidence in narrating simple events, mindful English, to make English the language of your inner thoughts and observations. And we talked about facing challenges and setbacks with kindness and patience. Remember, this journey is not a race. It's about finding your own rhythm and celebrating every single step, no matter how small. Your voice, your story, is an important part of the English-speaking world, and it deserves to be heard. The silent killer. Overcoming grammar anxiety and the perfectionist trap in detail. Now, let's get into the deep heart of the matter. We touched on the perfectionist trap and the fear of making a mistake, but I want to dedicate this entire section to it, because I honestly believe it's the #1 silent killer of speaking fluency. It's that little voice inside your head that says, "Don't speak yet." Is the verb tense correct? Is the preposition in or on? Is that the right word? This constant internal self-correction and fear of imperfection is a heavy anchor that keeps you from sailing. It's the difference between trying to express yourself and trying to pass an exam. In conversation, our goal is expression, not an A+. I have a really vivid memory of a student named May. May was a fantastic writer, a university student studying international relations. Her essays were meticulously researched and had flawless grammar. But when she had to participate in class discussions, she would say very little. One day, I saw her in a coffee shop, having a lively, animated conversation with her friend in her native language. I could see her hands moving, her eyes sparkling, and her voice full of passion. The next day, I asked her about it. "May," I said, "I saw you yesterday. You were so full of life. Why don't I see that in our English class?" She sighed and explained, "Sophia, in class, I feel like every word I say is being judged. I'm worried about using the past perfect tense incorrectly, or if my pronunciation of schedule is British or American. It's too much. So I just say nothing because silence is safe." May's experience is a textbook case of grammar anxiety. She had all the knowledge, her receptive skills were impeccable, but her productive skills were locked down by the overwhelming pressure to be perfect. She was so focused on the tiny details of grammar that she completely forgot the big picture: communication. To break free from this, we need to completely change our relationship with grammar when it comes to speaking. Instead of thinking of grammar as a strict set of rules to be perfectly followed, think of it as a flexible framework for communication. The goal is to be understood, not to be grammatically flawless. A few mistakes are normal, even for native speakers. Here's a simple, powerful practice you can do. It's called the Imperfection Challenge. The next time you're having a conversation, or even doing one of our solo practice exercises, consciously give yourself permission to make 3 grammar mistakes. Yes, you heard me right. Purposefully allow yourself to make mistakes. As you speak, just let the words flow. Don't stop to correct yourself. Don't worry about the tense or those on the end of the verb or the prepositions. Just get the idea out. When you're done, you can reflect on what you said, but during the actual speaking, the only rule is to keep going. This might feel incredibly strange at first, but it is a direct attack on that inner perfectionist. It teaches your brain that it's okay to make a mistake and that the world won't end if you use the wrong tense. It builds a tolerance for imperfection, which is the very first step toward natural, fluent speech. Another key part of this is understanding that a lot of what we know about grammar from textbooks isn't how people actually speak. We often learn individual words, but not how they fit together in a natural way. This is where moving from a single word mentality to a phrase-based mentality becomes essential. Let me tell you about a student named Kenji, a brilliant software engineer from Japan. Kenji had an incredible vocabulary. He could list dozens of synonyms for a single word, but when he spoke, it was often very slow and felt a bit choppy. He would say, "I am thinking about the project now." He was building his sentences one word at a time, just like you would with building blocks. I introduced Kenji to the idea of chunks, or common phrases that native speakers use all the time without thinking. Instead of learning just the word thinking, we started to focus on phrases like, I'm thinking about, I'm looking forward to, or I need to get going. These are not single words. They are ready-made, pre-packaged bits of language. When a native speaker says, I'm looking forward to the weekend, they don't consciously assemble I plus am plus looking plus forward plus to. It's just one fluid thought, one chunk. I gave Kenji a simple task. Every day, find 5 new phrases or chunks from a podcast, a book, or a conversation and write them down. Then, throughout the day, he had to use them in his internal monologue. For instance, he heard someone say, I'm having a hard time with this. He wrote it down, and then, later, when he was struggling with a piece of code, he'd silently say to himself, I'm having a hard time with this bug. Or, when he saw a friend, he would mentally rehearse, How have you been lately? Over time, something incredible happened. Kenji's speech started to sound more natural and much, much faster. He wasn't thinking word by word anymore. He was retrieving whole chunks of language. His brain was now equipped with a library of ready-made phrases, not just individual words. This completely bypassed the need for him to assemble sentences from scratch, and most importantly, it bypassed a lot of the grammar anxiety. He wasn't worrying about verb tenses because the phrase, I'm looking forward to, already had the correct grammar built into it. This is a fantastic strategy for you, B1 listeners. Your receptive skills are strong, so you have a huge reservoir of these phrases already in your mind. The challenge is to make them productive. Here are some simple phrases you can start with today. Just try saying them out loud, just to get used to the feel of them. I have to get going. Instead of, I must go. Moi chose. It's not a big deal. Instead of, it is not an important problem. Let's catch up soon. Instead of, let's meet to talk. I'm looking forward to. Instead of, I am excited for. What do you think? Instead of, what is your opinion? By actively listening for these chunks and then practicing saying them, you're building a powerful new muscle in your brain. You're moving from the slow, deliberate work of translation to the effortless, fluid work of natural conversation. The power of small talk. Building dialogue from the ground up. The real world of conversation is not a formal debate or a scripted monologue. It's built on small, easy, and often repeated conversations. This is what we call small talk, and it is the absolute gateway to bigger, more meaningful conversations. Small talk is often where people feel the most anxiety because it's spontaneous and doesn't follow a clear script. I have a story about a student from Argentina named Maria. Maria was an accountant, very precise and organized. She was fantastic in formal business meetings, but she was terrified of the casual conversations that happened before or after the meeting. The thought of talking about the weather or her weekend plans filled her with dread. She felt like she had nothing interesting to say, and she didn't know the right phrases to say it with. We decided to approach this scientifically, like a project. We created a small talk toolkit, and I want to share it with you now. This toolkit is not about memorizing scripted answers. It's about having a few solid, reliable phrases ready to go in common situations. This takes the pressure off your brain to create something from scratch, allowing you to just go for it. The weather. This is the most common small talk topic in the world. It's easy, it's neutral, and it's a great opener. Instead of just saying, "It is cold," you can use more natural descriptive phrases. "It's a beautiful day, isn't it? Looks like it's going to rain later." "I can't believe how hot it is today." "The weather has been so crazy lately, hasn't it?" The weekend. This is another universal topic. People love to talk about what they did or what they plan to do. To ask, "Did you have a good weekend?" Or, "What are your plans for the weekend?" To answer, "I had a great weekend, thank you. I went for a hike." Or, "My weekend was very relaxing. I just stayed at home and read a book." Satre, work or studies. A good option for starting a conversation with a colleague or a classmate. "How's your week going so far?" "Are you busy with a lot of projects this week?" "I'm looking forward to the end of the day." Wow, the key here is to have these phrases ready in your mind. Maria practiced these simple phrases with me in our sessions. She would mentally rehearse them on her way to work. She started to use them with her colleagues in the break room, and something amazing happened. She found that the conversations didn't end there. Someone would respond, and she would find a new opening. Her confidence grew with every small, successful interaction. She realized that small talk isn't about being interesting. It's about being friendly and engaging. Here's a small talk practice prompt for you to try. Imagine you're at a party and you meet someone new. Take a deep breath and say the following lines out loud, just for the practice of it. "Hi, I don't think we've met. My name is Sophia." Boratro Oriondat. "How do you know the host?" "What do you do?" Ars. "I work as a podcaster in Best English Podcast." Quarter. "How about you?" This is not a script for you to follow perfectly. It's a set of simple phrases to help you get started. The goal is to get comfortable with the rhythm of these basic social interactions. The more you practice them, the more natural they will become. Active listening for speaking, the secret tool you already have. We started this episode by talking about the gap between understanding and speaking. We've talked about a few ways to bridge that gap, but I want to talk now about the most powerful tool you already have in your possession, your amazing receptive skills. We're going to talk about active listening for speaking, a technique where you don't just listen to understand, but you listen to learn how to speak. Think about a baby learning a language. They spend months and months just listening. They're not just hearing sounds, They're absorbing patterns, rhythms, and grammar rules. Your brain is a brilliant pattern recognition machine. You have the ability to do the same thing, just a little more consciously. A student of mine named Leo, a student from Italy, was very frustrated because he felt like his English sounded unnatural and robotic. He would speak with perfect grammar, but the intonation was often flat, and he didn't use common filler words that make native speakers sound more natural. I told him to stop just listening to understand the story and to start listening for specific things. I gave him a task: listen to a short piece of audio, maybe a minute long, and listen for only two things: intonation and stress. Where does the speaker's voice go up and down? Where do they put emphasis on certain words to convey emotion? For example, the difference between "I can't believe it!" and "I can't believe it." The first expresses certainty, the second expresses surprise. Filler phrases and hesitation markers. Listen for phrases like "you know," "I mean," "kind of," and "well." These are not bad words. They are the natural sounds of a thinking brain. They give us time to think, and they make a conversation sound more human. Leo listened to a podcast with this new ear. He noticed that the speaker's voice would often go up at the end of a question, and that they would often pause and say, "Well, that's a good question," before answering. He started to mimic these things in his own shadowing and his own internal monologue. The transformation was amazing. His English didn't just sound more correct, it sounded more authentic. He was no longer a human dictionary, he was a human conversationalist. He had used his strongest skill, his listening, to directly improve his weakest skill, his speaking. So, for you, B1 learners, here is your next challenge. The next time you listen to the news, a podcast, or a conversation, don't just listen for the meaning. Listen for the melody of the language. Listen for the fillers and the pauses. Listen for the phrases that people use all the time. Then, try to mimic them, first in your mind, and then out loud. This will directly train your brain to speak in a more natural, authentic way, and it will give you the confidence to know that your English isn't just correct, it's real. Beyond the words, understanding the cognitive load of translation. Now, let's step back for a moment and go even deeper into the why. We've talked about fear and perfectionism, but there's a more subtle, deeply ingrained habit that's holding you back: the cognitive load of translation. Think about your brain as a computer with a limited amount of processing power. When you're speaking your native language, all of your brain's power is dedicated to one task: expressing your thoughts. Your thoughts flow out, organized and effortless. But when you're speaking English while still translating in your head, your brain is trying to do 2 or even 3 tasks at once. Formulate thought in your native language. Translate that thought into English. Say the English words out loud. At the same time, listen to the other person and process what they are saying. This is a massive amount of mental work, and it's simply unsustainable in a fast-paced conversation. The result is a slow response time, mental fatigue, and a feeling of being completely overwhelmed. This isn't a failure on your part. It's a technical limitation of a multitasking brain. I have a story about a brilliant young woman from Russia. Her name was Polina. Polina was an astrophysicist, and she could discuss incredibly complex theories in her native language with stunning clarity. Her English was good, but when she had to explain a concept in a group setting, she would get so frustrated. She told me, "Sophia, it's like I have to build a rocket ship in my head before I can even talk about it. I know all the parts, the words, the grammar, but by the time I've assembled the rocket, the conversation has already moved to a different planet. Polina's frustration was a direct result of this cognitive load. She wasn't just speaking, she was translating, editing, and assembling all at once. The solution for her was to stop trying to build a perfect rocket ship in her head. We focused on something called the bare bones method. The idea is to express a thought with the absolute minimum number of words, just to get the core idea out, and then add details later. It's like drawing a simple sketch before you start painting. I asked her to try explaining a concept in 3 steps. First, just the subject, the universe. Then add a simple verb and object. Is expanding. Then add a simple explanation. This means galaxies are moving away from each other. It wasn't a perfect, flowing sentence, but it was a clear, communicable thought. And the amazing part was, once she had that bare bones thought out, the rest of the words and phrases often came much more easily, because she had already gotten the main idea out of the way. She was no longer building a rocket ship. She was simply describing the universe as she saw it, one step at a time. This technique gave her the confidence to start speaking without the heavy burden of perfection, and she slowly started to rebuild her fluency. Losing your personality, finding your English voice. Another deeply emotional and frustrating part of this journey is the feeling that you lose your personality when you speak English. In your native language, you are a whole person, funny, sarcastic, serious, passionate, or charming. But when you speak English, you might feel like you've been reduced to a simple, generic version of yourself. You can't make jokes, you can't be sarcastic, and you can't use the clever expressions that make you, well, you. This is a very real feeling, and it's a direct result of being so focused on the mechanics of the language that there's no mental space left for your own unique style. I have a story about a young comedian from Brazil. His name was Gabriel. Gabriel was a naturally funny guy, the kind of person who could make an entire room laugh with a single comment. But in English, he was completely silent. He told me, "Sophia, in my native language, my humor is like a fast-moving river. I see a chance to make a joke, and it just flows out. In English, it's like a dry, dusty road. I can see the joke, but I have to stop, dig up the words, assemble them, and by the time I'm ready, the moment is gone. I'm not a funny person in English, I'm just a person who says things." Gabriel's experience is so common because personality is not just about words. It's about timing, intonation, and cultural nuance. So, to help him, we didn't focus on learning jokes. We focused on 2 key things: emotional labeling and vocal variation. First, for emotional labeling, I told him to listen to English comedians or actors, and every time they expressed an emotion, anger, frustration, joy, surprise, he had to label it out loud. For example, he'd hear someone say, "I can't believe he said that," and he'd say to himself, "That's surprise and a little bit of shock." Or he'd hear a sarcastic comment, and he'd say, "That's sarcasm. The tone goes up at the end, and the smile is a little fake." Odd. By consciously labeling emotions, he was building a direct connection between an emotional state and its English expression, bypassing the need for translation. Second, for vocal variation. I had him practice saying simple sentences in different ways to convey different emotions. For example, he'd say the phrase, "Oh, really?" But he'd try saying it in a sarcastic way, a surprised way, a disappointed way, and a genuinely curious way. He was learning to use his voice as a tool for expression, not just a tool for words. After a few weeks, Gabriel told me that he was starting to feel a tiny bit of his personality coming back. He wasn't a master comedian yet, but he was able to use a little sarcasm with a friend, and his friend laughed. That moment of connection, of being truly understood as himself, was a huge victory. It showed him that his personality wasn't gone. It was just waiting for him to learn how to express it in a new language. Structured practice, building the bridge. One step at a time. So, how do we put all of this into a practical daily routine? We can't just say, start speaking. We need structured, low-stakes practice that allows us to build confidence and fluency without the pressure of a real conversation. The first method is the daily spoken journal. This is an evolution of our 3-sentence story. Every day, find a quiet moment, maybe in your car on your commute, or in your room before you go to bed, and just talk to yourself for 5 to 10 minutes. Pretend you are a vlogger or just a friend telling a story. Don't worry about grammar, don't worry about perfection. The only rule is to just talk. Talk about your day, what you ate for lunch, what made you happy, what made you frustrated. You're not trying to be perfect, you're just trying to get the words out. I remember a student named Sophia, like me, a busy marketing professional from Spain. Sophia was a master of organization, so we took a very structured approach. She decided to use her commute time every day for her spoken journal. On Mondays, she would review her weekend. On Tuesdays, she would talk about her goals for the week. On Wednesdays, she would describe a meal she ate. On Thursdays, she would talk about a movie she watched. And on Fridays, she would make a plan for the weekend. This structured approach took the pressure off of her to think of a topic, and it forced her to use different types of vocabulary and tenses throughout the week. After a month, she told me that her brain was starting to automatically switch to English when she got in the car. It had become a habit, a natural and effortless part of her day. The next technique is guided imagination. This is a powerful way to practice for specific, real-world situations in a completely safe, low-pressure environment, your own mind. Find a quiet space, close your eyes for a moment, and imagine yourself in a specific situation. Scenario 1, the restaurant. Imagine you are sitting down at a new restaurant. What do you say to the host? The waiter comes to your table. You ask for a menu. What do you order? How do you ask for a recommendation? What do you say when you want to pay? Practice these simple but crucial interactions out loud, speaking to your imaginary waiter. Scenario 2, the shopping trip. Imagine you are in a clothing store. You want to ask for a different size. How do you do it? You want to know if they have a different color. What do you say? The cashier asks, "Did you find everything okay?" How do you respond? Scenario 3, explaining a recipe. Imagine you are talking to a friend and you want to tell them how to make your favorite meal. What ingredients do you need? What are the steps? First, you need to chop the onions. Then, you heat the oil. This forces you to use sequencing words and imperative verbs. By practicing these scenarios in your mind and out loud, you are building the neural pathways for these conversations. When you are in the actual situation, the words will be much easier to find because you've already rehearsed them. You are training your brain to move from a receptive state to a productive state, and you are doing it on your own terms. The power of active listening, the advanced B1 bridge. Your B1 listening skills are your superpower. You have a huge advantage over beginners because you have a vast amount of English in your brain. We've talked about listening for intonation and rhythm, but let's take it a step further. we're going to talk about vocabulary hijacking and listening for structure. Vocabulary hijacking is a simple but incredibly effective technique. When you are in a conversation with someone who is a more fluent speaker and they use a word or a phrase you like, you hijack it and use it in your next sentence. Don't worry about being a copycat. You are a learner, and this is how you learn. I remember a student named Kenji, the same Kenji from before, who had mastered the phrase-based approach. He was having a conversation with a colleague about a business deal that had gone wrong. The colleague said, "Yeah, it was a really tricky situation, but we managed to sort it out." Whoa! The phrase tricky situation was new to Kenji. A few minutes later, the colleague asked him about a problem in his project. Kenji's brain, which was now actively listening for new words, immediately pulled up that phrase. He said, "Well, it's a bit of a tricky situation, but I think I have a solution." He had hijacked the phrase and used it perfectly. The colleague didn't even notice, but Kenji had just added a new phrase to his active vocabulary. He wasn't translating difficult problem anymore. He was now using a natural common phrase. This is what a B1 learner can do. You have the ability to understand the context. All you need to do is consciously listen for new, useful phrases and then immediately try to use them. This is the ultimate bridge between listening and speaking, because it's a direct one-to-one transfer of new language from your ear to your mouth. Next, we have listening for structure. This is a more advanced technique, but it is incredibly powerful. When you listen to a podcast, a speech, or a conversation, don't just listen for the words. Listen for the structure of the argument. Where does the speaker start? What is the main idea? What are the 3 supporting points they make? What is their conclusion? How do they transition from one point to the next? Example: first, in addition, furthermore, to conclude. A student named Hiroshi, the nurse from before, was struggling with giving longer explanations. His English was good for small talk, but when he had to explain a complex medical procedure to a patient, he would get lost. We started to practice listening for structure. I gave him a short medical podcast and told him to listen for the main point and 3 supporting ideas. He would then try to replicate that structure using the same transitions to explain a simple concept to me, like how to make a cup of coffee. He'd say, "Well, the main point is that you need a clean cup. First, you add the coffee. In addition, you add the sugar. To conclude, you add the boiling water." It sounded a little formal, but he was building the mental muscle for longer, more organized speech. Over time, he was able to take this structure and use it to explain a complex medical procedure with clarity and confidence. He had used his listening skills to learn how to build a coherent argument, and that is a truly powerful skill for a B1 learner. The amazing transformation, becoming a true English speaker. The combined effect of consistently and diligently applying these techniques is truly life-changing. Over time, you'll notice a significant and remarkable decrease in how long it takes you to respond during English conversations. You'll stop feeling like you're always translating, and instead, you'll start to feel like you are truly thinking in English. This fundamental change leads to an unmatched increase in how spontaneous and natural you sound, and most importantly, in your confidence. You'll find yourself able to express complex ideas more clearly, more powerfully, and with far less effort to find the right words. More than just becoming fluent, this process helps you develop an English linguistic identity. You begin to instinctively understand the subtle meanings, the built-in humor, the common cultural references, and the many subtle ways native speakers express themselves. You change from simply being someone who speaks English to becoming someone who truly expresses themselves in English, someone who embodies the language. This, my friends, is the ultimate goal of learning a language, to understand the language so deeply that it becomes an essential, effortless part of how your mind works, like a second native tongue. Let's go back to my friend Lena, whose initial struggles with the translation treadmill we talked about at the very beginning. After months of dedicated and consistent practice, starting with simple internal thoughts about her day, progressing to mentally planning presentations, and then having complex internal debates about her career choices, she had a truly amazing breakthrough moment. She was giving a crucial presentation at an international conference entirely in English, and afterwards, she called me, her voice shining with excitement. "Sophia!" she exclaimed. "It was incredible!" I wasn't thinking about the words. I was just thinking about the ideas, the concepts I wanted to convey. The English just came out naturally, almost without me consciously trying. It was the first time I truly felt like myself, speaking English, as if it were my own language. That, dear listeners, is the profound power we are aiming for. That is the ultimate freedom that these techniques can give you, a freedom to express your authentic self. This journey, let me be clear, won't happen overnight. It requires endless patience, continuous effort, and a real willingness to step outside your usual language comfort zone. But I promise you, the rewards are huge. You're not just learning a language. You're actively changing your brain to work in a new language mode. You're expanding your mental horizons and discovering a new way to experience and interact with the world, a richer, more connected way. So, let's quickly review the comprehensive path we've explored today. We started by understanding the fundamental gap between receptive and productive skills and the mental hurdles that keep us from speaking. We then armed ourselves with practical, low-pressure techniques, shadowing, to build comfort with the rhythm and sound of spoken English. The response rehearsal, to practice actively responding to what you hear. The 3-sentence story, to build confidence in narrating simple events. Mindful English, to make English the language of your inner thoughts and observations. And we talked about facing challenges and setbacks with kindness and patience. Remember, this journey is not a race. It's about finding your own rhythm and celebrating every single step, no matter how small. Your voice, your story, is an important part of the English-speaking world, and it deserves to be heard. Thank you so much for joining me on the Best English podcast. I hope today's deep dive into this common struggle has not only given you a better understanding of the problem, but also a fresh sense of hope and a new set of tools to move forward. Start small today. Pick one of these techniques and try it for just 5 minutes. I promise you, you will see a difference. This is Sophia, signing off. Keep speaking, keep learning, and keep growing. I'll be back with you next time for another inspiring episode.